Jerry Wolf had the afternoon shift at WWCO. There was no one on the radio like him. He was funny, smart, quick, irreverent, creative, everything I hoped to be. And he had this saying, his signature phrase that everybody knew.
This Jerry Wolf rapping on you and pumping out you what you're pumping in on the request line.
I wasn't even sure what it meant, but it was original, and it sounded cool. He talked so fast, it felt like each word was shot out of his mouth like a machine gun. I would imitate him at home over and over again until I could talk just as fast. That must have driven my folks crazy. I saw Jerry's picture once at the Naugatuck Valley Mall in a print advertisement for a mod clothing store called Chess King. From that moment on, his image became my vision of what every DJ should look like. He was tall, thin, with long dark hair down to his shoulders and a full beard trimmed close to his face. As soon as school let out at the end of the year, I decided to make my move. I picked up the phone in our hallway upstairs, stretched the cord as far as it would reach into my bedroom, closed the door, and sat on my bed at the window. I practiced what I was going to say, then started dialing the WWCO request line. 2 days later, I finally got through.
Hey man, this is Jer, 1240 CO. What can I do for you?
All keyed up from waiting so long, I blurted out what I wanted to say in one breath, faster than Jerry's own radio rap. Hi, Jerry. My name's Dave Cipriano. I really like WWCO, and I love your show, and someday I want to be a disc jockey, too. And I was wondering if there is any chance, if someday I could come down to the radio station and meet you and see what the station is like someday.
Well, cool. Cool, man. That'd be really cool. Yeah, we can have you come down. Hey, listen, little man, just call this number and we'll set it up for you.
After I hung up the phone, I sat calmly, staring out the window, for about 1 second, before I let out a yell. I could hardly believe what just happened. I'd actually talked to Jerry Wolf, my idol, the coolest DJ on the radio. I played the conversation over and over again in my head. Right away, I got back on the phone to call every one of my friends. I couldn't wait to tell them I talked to that guy on the radio. Even better, that he invited me to come down to the station. During the school year, my mom had to practically drag me out of bed every morning. But the day I was scheduled to visit CO, I shot off the mattress like I was launched out of an Apollo rocket. Dad was at work and my mom didn't drive, so I had to take the bus from Oakville to downtown Waterbury. The bus stop was in front of the only movie theater in town, called the Mighty Oak. That's where I saw all of my favorite films, like Steve McQueen's Bullet and Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston. In the bright light of day, I noticed the Mighty Oak looked kind of small and insignificant. It was about a 20-minute ride to Exchange Place, the bus station downtown in the center of Waterbury. Across the street was a large rectangle of grass called the Green, our city park. Summer had grabbed hold of Connecticut. I saw businessmen on park benches sweating through their suits, women in page boy haircuts and polka dot dresses, teenagers stretched out on blankets on the grass with their hair hanging down and their transistor radios turned up. I heard snatches of 1240 WWCO in the air as I walked past a diner on South Main Street. There was a sign in the window advertising a cheeseburger deluxe blue plate special for 35 cents and a chocolate shake for an extra 16 pennies. A few doors down was an old brick building, 6 stories high, with a wooden glass door out front. That was my destination, 65 Bank Street. I stopped for a second to catch my breath, then yanked open the door. There was a long hallway with dark wood floors, and my eyes had to adjust to the changing light. At the end of the hall was an elevator lit by a single bare light bulb. An older man with thin gray hair was sitting on a metal stool just inside. He was wearing dark wool pants, so out of place on a summer day, a white short-sleeved shirt, and a rag of a skinny black tie around his neck. As I walked over to the elevator, he looked up from his newspaper and snuffed out a half-smoked cigarette. I pulled out a wrinkled piece of paper that was stuffed into my back pocket and checked out the few words I had scribbled down to make sure I was headed to the right place. Excuse me, sir. I'm here to see Jerry Wolf. Can you please take me up to the 5th floor?
Well, this thing don't go sideways, kid, so we only got one choice.
I stepped in as he reached past me to shut a large metal door, then tugged sideways on an accordion gate until it clicked shut. He pulled on a long-armed lever and the elevator jerked upwards towards number 5. As we moved higher, I heard muffled music coming through the walls, getting louder with each floor. He guided the elevator to a smooth stop, slid back the gate, and on the inside of the metal door was a big number 5 stenciled in white paint. That door was the last obstacle to the unknown adventure waiting on the other side for me. A kid from a small town with big dreams. Once that door opened, I was positive my life was going to change forever. The first thing my eyes settled on was a pretty girl in a pink paisley miniskirt standing next to the reception desk.
Hi, you must be David. Welcome to WWCO.
She was about 10 years older than me, and she had on the shortest, totally mod, miniest skirt I had ever seen. Her long dark hair was parted in the middle, with 2 blonde streaks on either side of her face. Her wrists were loaded with a bunch of bright-colored plastic bracelets, and when she reached to shake my hand, they clattered up and down with each arm pump. I followed her towards a small lobby, with my eyes riveted on her extremely short skirt. With each step, I could see the line of her pantyhose where it changed to a darker color, and I kept watching and waiting for her skirt to go higher. When we got to the lobby, she stopped short, turned back around, and tapped her toe on the floor. Startled, I nearly bumped into her.
Do you like this, David?
Uh-oh, I thought. Did she catch me looking at her legs? But thankfully, I was wrong. Looking down at the floor, she said,
Mr. Griffin had this made just for us when he bought the radio station. Isn't it fab?
Right in the middle of the floor, set out in black tile under her white patent leather boots, were the words WWCO 1240 on your radio dial. Next to that was a picture of a classic microphone emblazoned on the white floor. Did I think it was fab? Hell yeah! I'd never seen a custom-made sign built right into the floor. That was cool. Next, she took me on a quick tour around the office. There were gold records on the walls in big picture frames and magazines called Billboard, 16, Tiger Beat, all over the place. There was a knockout secretary named Dorsey Dews who typed up the log of commercials that ran on the air. She had legs that went on forever. We walked past women in tight T-shirts pounding away on their typewriters and salesmen yakking on the phone wearing big ties under big collars. I saw a sports coat hanging on the back of a guy's chair with a badge on the pocket that said WWCO, a Merv Griffin station. All of that action was enough to make my head spin. But suddenly it was overshadowed by the sound of the top 40 hit In the Year 2525 by Zager and Evans, pouring out of a speaker mounted on the wall. As the song began to fade, the voice of Waterbury's favorite DJ shouted out over those last few notes.
Zager and Evans band in the year 2525. Woo! That's a long time from now. I hope chicks are still wearing minis, because if not, what's the point?
A female chorus of peppy, sweet harmony sang out cheerfully. Then the opening bars of the next song instantly started up. Everyday People by Sly and the Family Stone.
WWCO, man, Jer Wolf rapping on you and pumping out you what you're pumping in on the request lines. Because we're all in this together, man. Can you dig it? You, me, and Sly Stone, we're just everyday people.
Bam! Sly Stone's voice cut through immediately, loud and clear, right on beat, singing the opening lyric. I was pulled back into the room by the sound of a young woman's voice.
So, are you ready to go upstairs to the studio to meet Jerry?
I sure am. I was curious about everything I saw that day and innocent enough to say whatever was on my mind. I had plenty of questions, but there was one that to me was the most important. Hey, do you get to talk to Jerry and the rest of the DJs all the time?
Yeah, I sure do.
Wow. From the office, we walked towards a flight of worn-down wooden stairs. We climbed up to the 6th floor into another hallway. Straight ahead was a room with a couple of green vinyl chairs and a matching sofa with shiny chrome legs. There was a table up against the wall with a half-empty mug of something sitting on top, next to a leftover cheeseburger and an ashtray full of cigarette butts.
That's the Jock Lounge,
said my mini-skirted tour guide.
That's where the DJs hang out before and after their shows.
I stuck my head through the door and smiled, thinking how I might look sitting in one of those chairs. It was like a clubhouse for grown-ups. I didn't care about the stains on the cushions or the trash on the floor. It was perfect. We walked down the hallway between 2 huge indoor windows on both sides of us. I turned to the right, and through the glass, there was a guy sitting behind a microphone wearing a cowboy hat. That sure wasn't Jerry Wolf.
That's the FM studio. That's our country music station.
What language was she speaking? Who the heck listens to FM radio or country music? I turned around to ask about Jerry when my eyes drifted over through the window on the other side of the hallway. And there he was, looking exactly like the picture I'd seen at the mall, Jerry Wolf. He'd just finished saying something on the radio, and he was taking off his sleek black headphones when he looked up and caught sight of the two of us in the hallway. He flashed a smile and waved for us to come inside his lair.
David, this is Jerry Wolf.
Hey, man, how you doing? So, you want to be a DJ someday, huh? Huh, I sure do. Wow, this is really something. Jerry leaned over a stack of records and stuck out his hand for a shake, and I grabbed on to keep from falling over. There was so much to see, I hardly knew where to start. The AM studio was one step up from the hall floor, a floating room with a huge, heavy door and thick, soundproof walls. It was like stepping onto a concert stage. The first thing that hit me was how cool everything was, the feel of the room, and even the temperature. While the rest of the building made do with window fans to beat the heat, the studio was air-conditioned to a chilly 68 degrees. There were pictures of rock stars on the walls, along with posters of my favorite bands. I saw Led Zeppelin's debut LP with a black and white image of the Hindenburg exploding. Next to that was Tommy James and the Shondells' psychedelic cover for Crimson and Clover. There were 45 RPM records everywhere and metal racks with plastic cartridges in each slot. The music was booming in my ears. Jerry stood in the middle of the room with all the equipment surrounding him in a U shape. He was captain of the ship, running the control board, 2 turntables, tape machines, his microphone, and other stuff I didn't even know what to call. When I glanced at the telephone, it looked like it was on fire. Every single number glowed with a blinking white light. Jerry was constantly in motion, a frenetic mass of energy rapping and pumping his way through the afternoon. He wore a long-sleeved shirt rolled up at his wrists, with a button-up vest and dark blue jeans. I could tell he cared about his looks, but in a good way, like the way he cared about his job. He pulled up a chair for me, and I sat down right next to him. Hey, man, hold on a second. I got to go on the radio. He popped on his earphones. They seemed to be made out of the same Bakelite plastic as our kitchen radio back home, and I saw the word Cleveite stamped on the side and made a mental note to remember that name. Headphones in place, Jerry cranked up the volume of the studio speaker. It was incredibly loud, crisp and clean. He watched the record go round on the turntable to his right and then flipped a switch to turn on his microphone. As soon as he did that, the room was absolutely silent. The music was now blasting solely in Jerry's ears. He started tapping his foot and shaking his whole body, and I can hear the music leaking out of his headphones. Then he started rapping to his radio listeners, telling everyone how hip the song was. At the same time he was doing that, he started up the next record on the other turntable. And over the intro of the new song, he reminded his loyal multitude of sunbathing fans that it was time to turn, so you just don't burn.
WWCO, man. Jerry Wolf rapping on you and pumping out you with your pumping in on the request lines. And hey, my people, don't forget it's time to turn, so you just don't burn. Yeah.
He did this whole thing right in front of me, and it was like listening to my transistor radio at home, but it was all coming out of his mouth. And I was like, far out. It was unbelievable. I sat there for a little while longer until my personal tour guide came back to get me. At the end of my visit, I guess Jerry saw the stars in my eyes, or maybe he saw a young kid who would help him with some of the work he wasn't fond of doing every week, because he asked me if I would like to come back. You know, little man, I'm the music director here, and it's a lot of work sorting through all the records and keeping the library straight. Listen, why don't you come down on Saturdays and help me out? You know, you can meet the other guys, and I'll show you how all this stuff works. It's exactly what I did. Every weekend for the rest of the summer. At home, before heading for the bus, I would grab my record case stuffed with 45s along with my lunch and then head outside, giving one last look back because whenever I left the house, my mom always stood behind the screen door waving at me. Every weekend, Mom made me a fresh meatball grinder with her homemade sauce. At least that's what we called them. Where you live, they might have been called hoagies or subs. Or maybe you don't name them at all, and you're just content to eat them. Mom would cook up the meatballs while I was getting dressed, slather them onto fresh Italian bread, and wrap it up in aluminum foil. I could still feel the heat radiating out of the paper bag, even after I got off the bus downtown. I stayed at the station until 10 or 11 at night when my dad drove down to pick me up. That whole summer, I filed records, ripped news from the wire machines, ran out to pick up food for the DJs, answered phone calls, and basically did anything Jerry asked of me. I think if anyone had told me to clean the bathrooms, I would have done that too. After his shift, Jerry always had to record a couple of commercials, so he took me into the production room with him to show me how everything works. He was a perfectionist in the booth, sometimes taking 2 or 3 hours to produce a spot until he was satisfied. As long as it took, I would watch and learn. He taught me how to thread the reel-to-reel tape and how to fire up the cart machines so I could run commercials. Oh, but the best time of all was the very first day he showed me how to cue up a record. All right, man, now I'm going to show you how radio works. Can you dig it? How you play a jingle, start up a record, and how you talk over the intro of a song. He sat me down and pulled a record out of its sleeve. You're going to like this tune, man. It's a cool record. It's the brand new Rolling Stones single we just started playing today. It's called Honky Tonk Women. He put the record on the turntable, picked up the needle, put it at the front of the record, and flipped the switch. The huge turntable began to spin, and the second you heard the cowbell at the beginning of Honky Tonk Women, he said, "Okay, now we're going to stop it right here." And he put his index finger on the record and started slipping it backwards to that first sound. And then he brought it back another half turn after that. Next, he pulled out an audio cart that had a label on it that said WWCO Jingle. And he slipped it into the cart machine and pulled back a lever, locking it in place. Then he said, "Okay, so you do your rap on the microphone. Then you hit the button on the cart machine that starts the jingle. WWCO. But you have to anticipate the end of them singing CO. So you can start your record on time. Right around the time they're singing, you have to flip the switch to start the turntable spinning. By the time they sing, the turntable will have rotated a half turn to get up to speed, and your song will start, bam, right after they finish singing. It's got to go right into the song, man, so timing is everything." Then it was my turn. I was excited, and I wanted to get it just right. And I guess he understood because Jerry left me alone to figure it out for myself. It was the first time ever I was allowed to play with the equipment in the production room all by myself. I was like a kid in the candy store. I pushed all the buttons. I turned up the music as loud as I can stand it. I spent at least an hour, maybe more, in the production room that day, doing my make-believe radio show. Jerry's wired-up energy rubbed off on me, and I kept queuing up Honky Tonk Women until I destroyed the beginning of that record. From that moment on, Jerry told me I could go into that studio whenever I wanted to practice how to be a DJ. He even gave me my own reel of tape so I could record myself to take home later for a listen. I was living my dream. Before I knew it, summer was nearly over. I was having so much fun, time flew right by. I packed up my 45s, grabbed my reel-to-reel tapes, and wondered how I would get through school without being able to visit the radio station anymore. And worst of all, I had to say goodbye to Jerry Wolf. I'm not sure why Jerry took an interest in helping me get started, and I might not ever know. As nice as Jerry was, I never got close to him, as I did later with some of the other guys. He kept a little distant, like a teacher with a student, while the other DJs would become my friends. By the end of my first summer, Jerry got another job out of town and left WWCO forever. I can't remember what station he went to, and I never saw him again. But about 5 years after he had moved on, I heard one of his tapes. It was an air check, what you send out to radio stations to show how you sound on your show when you're looking for a new gig. It was 1974, and Jerry was hoping to get his old job back at CO. The program director at the station knew I used to work for Jerry, so he let me listen to the tape. I wish I never had heard it. It was upsetting. I don't know if it was just because I was older or because Jerry had changed, but it sounded like he was doing a parody of his old show, trying to revive his pumpin' and rappin' routine. His head was in a different space, and his heart wasn't in it. What he once did so naturally and seemingly without effort, he was now trying to force it to get a job. It didn't work. It was uncomfortable listening to him as he spoke to the program director in what was an audio letter, asking him for a break. I was too young to know how to handle those feelings, too shaken to find out what happened to him. I prefer to think of Jerry the way he looked and sounded the first time I met him, when he was the top DJ in town, the coolest guy on the radio. I realized for all the afternoons I spent with him that summer of 1969, I didn't even know if Jerry Wolf was his real name or something he made up. I just know without him, I might never have made it into radio. He was my teacher, mentor, the image of what I thought every disc jockey should be, especially me.